Hi, my name is Edward Conn. I'm a transpersonal psychotherapist and dual diagnosis clinician and consultant addiction therapist. So today I want to talk a little bit about why people struggle to resolve their addictions and why addictions are so difficult to resolve through traditional methodologies, including 12-step program approach, and people who go into rehabilitation, and general approaches which are utilised for traditionally treating addiction issues. So I want to address some of the key areas of why I feel that these approaches do not get the results that are possible and do not get the results that they should. And there's a number of specific reasons for this. I've discovered these reasons in my 20 years of working with people with addictions, and I've learnt ways to change the protocols of what I do in line with what gets results. So the issues which I'm going to cover today are some of the key issues which prevent recovery from an addiction happening. The first one of which is the idea that people have already around addiction as being a disease. So if you believe that addiction is a disease and you're being told that addiction is disease, and those around you believe the same, which often is the case, this is culturally what we have, it's also professionally what we have, that disease idea and concept is effectively telling you it's something which is outside of your ability to do anything about. It's ingrained as a part of your biology. That is what a disease is. And you can't change it. So the first point is, if you cannot conceive of something, how do you achieve it? So conceptually, if you cannot conceive that this issue is something which is resolvable, which is fixable, which is able to be healed from and moved on from, how do you possibly achieve that? Because in your mind you have in your imagination the idea that this thing is a disease, meaning it can't be fixed. So how do you start out on a process and a journey to fix something if what you're being told is that it can't be fixed? So my first point is that the disease model effectively makes it impossible for people to imagine the idea of change happening. And this goes against the grain of what it is and how a human being operates and needs to operate neurologically for themselves. So that is flaw number one. The second flaw is based on the first flaw, and it's this idea that you are powerless over your addiction. It is greater than you, it is stronger than you, and you are powerless to do anything about it. So this engenders another concept in people's minds, that they are inherently weak, and their weakness is in opposition to an intractable problem. And they are repeatedly told that they are weak and they're powerless to their addiction. And therefore they need to admit that, and therefore they need to give in, try to struggle against it. So what people tell me when they come out of therapy or rehabilitation is they tell me that being told that they were powerless actually fed in to their vulnerabilities. It even fed into them giving up on themselves and thinking, well, if I can't beat it, I may as well enjoy it and I'll go down in flames. So it actually has exactly the opposite effect of what it's designed to do. And I've seen this time and time again with clients. So the second problem, that you're powerless, compounds the first problem, that is a disease, and that creates an even bigger problem, which in psychological terms we call a double bind. The double bind is the idea that you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Which makes sense of why people then will say, well, if I can't get better, I may as well enjoy the chaos, and there's nothing more I can do about it. They are defeated. So those 2 points present the starting methods, the starting points for how treatment is conceptualized. So it puts massive barriers in the place of actually getting better, and it's exactly why people struggle. So the double bind makes it impossible to be able to move forward, and it ties people more tightly into this idea of being helpless. It shows them that they're helpless, and it also gives this idea that therefore the addiction is a disease. Now, this doesn't actually fit with people often from what they report back to me. They don't really buy into that, but it's what they're being told. And they kind of intuitively know that this isn't true, but they don't necessarily know why it's not true. And they don't know where else to get help from. And when they're working with sponsors, when they're maybe working with key workers, rehabilitation programs, whatever it might be, if they feed back that they don't believe these concepts, they get told that they're just being difficult, that they're being resistant, and that they haven't bought into the whole idea of what is required to get better. So there's the double bind tightening. You're just not doing what's right. You need to succumb. You need to become weaker. You're fighting against this idea. So it becomes a spiral down into disbelief and helplessness, which actually then alienates them from that ideology working for them. And it's these types of people who have experienced these sorts of failures and have intuitively known and intellectually known that this doesn't really work for them, it can't work for them, who end up looking for something different. And over the years, I've seen many, many, many of these clients and have helped these clients get better. So these are two fundamental core areas of the traditional addictive ideology approach, which make it practically impossible for a lot of people to utilize it to get better. So a third point I would make is very important as well, and it's about environment. So your addiction doesn't just act and exist in some sort of abstract space. Your addiction is inherently tied to your current environment, and it responds directly to your own life, the cues, the triggers, the stressors, the things that are going on in your life, which are that person's world. Now, for each person that will be different, but it is where they live and it's where the addiction is live, active. So your environment is a key part of your treatment. So if you go away to rehabilitation, you're away for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, you will be getting better because you'll be away from your poison. You'll be away from your environment, which is a stressor, and you will invariably, in that time of respite that you get, you will repair and get better. But the problem is what happens then when you return back to that environment. You might have explored conceptually what your issues are, what your triggers are, what your weaknesses are whilst you're in rehab, sitting around talking about your issues with other people who share similar issues. But you're out of that environment and you're out of the context. So this means that when people are turned out and they go back home, that their vulnerabilities will inevitably return in the context of their environment. This is a problem. So my treatment approach addresses this, because the way I look at addiction treatment is the person needs to be taught how to manage themselves in their environment as a functioning human being, and that is the only way of overcoming what the issues are in their environment. So those need to be explored directly, intimately, and in detail with solutions to those problems. Often those problems need to be addressed singularly and specifically in each and every case of what they are. So that makes treatment from that point of view a bespoke process. But it's a bespoke process that takes place in the context of that person being in their environment. And that's why I conceptualize that addiction should be done. It is not an abstract concept, it's not an ideology, it's an approach, and it's a learning process, and it's also a reparative process. It's not a reparative process solely over the addiction, that's the first step, but it's a reparative process over the failings that one has had in one's own life that need to be resolved for that person to be a functioning human being. So this gets into the fourth point. And the fourth point is the underlying issues that that person has are an exact mirror of the addiction, or vice versa. The addictive behavior is a mirror of the underlying issues. So the underlying issues need to be addressed. And in rehabilitation, they're maybe discussed, mentioned, made a list of. In therapy, it might be the same. But really, to actually change the person, those underlying issues need to be resolved. And again, for each and every person, that will be different. And what a psychotherapeutic approach and an in-depth approach and a functional approach to addiction treatment does is address those issues simultaneously with the acting out behaviour in the environment that that person is experiencing them in. And those elements being done together is what creates a comprehensive, active approach to that person's well-being and supports them in learning their own recovery. And this is what we call secondary recovery. Secondary recovery is recovering from the underlying issues that contributed to the problem in the first place. The problem is the primary condition. The drinking, the acting out, the taking drugs, whatever that behaviour might be, is the primary problem. The 12-step disease model approach looks to stop the primary problem, stop the behaviour, accept you've got a disease, and don't act out again, and be supported in that within that community-based system. And that's good, but it's only a partial solution. So within 12 steps, they allude to the idea of a secondary recovery, but their ideology doesn't allow themselves to conceive that there is a possibility of that, because it's predicated on the idea, which was point one, that this is a disease. Okay? So that ideology is bound in and of itself to only really be able to kind of eat itself. It cannot break out of that. So that has to be changed if you're going to get resolution, and that's what I do in my approach. So the final point I would like to make is that all of this is learned behaviour. As human beings, we are creatures that learn within our environments. And what we're doing at the time, we may not know whether it's good or bad, or the implications of it in the future. And people don't set out to become addicts. They become addicts as a result of life circumstances building upon life behaviours. And whenever those reach a critical mass, that addictive behaviour, based on the amount of underlying emotional pressure, stress, pain, etc. in life, starts to become self-medicated against, acted out on, and that is a way of trying to resolve temporarily the pain that that person's going through. And the learned behaviour compounded and in tandem with the dysfunctional feeling state and disposition of that person, which creates powerlessness, is the problem. So to resolve that, you need to resolve the underlying issues. You need to actually look at how that behaviour was learned, and you need to learn how to unlearn it. This is very important, and my approach has designed a way to unlearn conditioned behaviour. And that gets into the neurology of what's happening in the brain around the triggers. So the dopamine system has been hijacked around self-medicating behaviour. The dopaminergic system needs to be retrained around healthy reward-based behaviours. And that's something I can do very quickly with people, because I've got very deep and very effective methods of doing that, which have been learned over 20 years, and I can now apply to people very rapidly. So you have 5 key points there which make addiction resolution, whether you're trying to do it yourself, whether you're doing it through traditional means, whether you're doing it through a counsellor who doesn't have the depth of skills to do this properly, and therefore why people fail and why they're stuck and why addiction looks like a disease. Because all of those factors together make it for many people nearly impossible to resolve. If you'd like any more information about this, please contact me through my website. The link is below, and I'd be more than happy to have a consultation with you via Skype or some other similar tool. So thanks for watching the video. There'll be more to come, and have a great day. Bye bye.